Mr. Lyde always knew how to make children laugh, but no one ever suspected how far that superpower would go. He was the kind of teacher every parent wanted for their child. His classroom was always full of laughter, with students eagerly raising their hands to answer questions. His charm was effortless, and his rapport with the children seemed almost magical. He had a way of making each student feel seen, like they were the most important person in the world. Parents smiled knowingly when their children mentioned his name at home, thankful for such a caring and attentive teacher. To the students, Mr. Lyde wasn't just another adult. He was someone who made them feel safe, who understood them in ways their parents or teachers didn't. He encouraged them to dream, to be creative, and to take risks in their learning. "You're special," he would often say. His smile wide and reassuring, but beneath that warmth, there was fleeting moments. To everyone, he was the perfect teacher, yet there was something about the way he interacted with the children, especially the girls, that got Miss Tosin, a fellow teacher, worried. She couldn't quite put her finger on it, and she convinced herself it was nothing. After all, how could someone like Mr. Lyde be anything other than what he appeared to be? A man with such charm couldn't possibly hide darkness, could he? School was over and the children excitedly rushed out of their classrooms to wait for their parents or bosses. But as usual, a few waited behind in Mr. Lyde's classroom, eager for one more moment of his attention. He had a way of drawing them in, making even the most mundane activities feel like special privileges.
Alright, who is ready for a game, Mr.
Lyde smiled, glancing at the small group that had stayed behind.
We are going to play an interesting game.
He said. As he introduced the game with playful enthusiasm, the children giggled and eagerly agreed to play along. It was simple: pass the ball, answer a question. But as the game progressed, the questions grew stranger, a little more personal. He asked one girl if she had any secrets, then laughed it off when she hesitated to answer, saying,
We all have little secrets, don't we?
The tension was invisible to the children, marked by their trust in him. To them, it was just a game with Mr. Lyde, their favorite teacher. But to him, it was something else, a way to test boundaries, to see how far he could go without raising alarms. In his mind, it was harmless. He hadn't crossed any lines, not yet. He convinced himself it was all part of his magic power and part of his connection with the students. It wasn't wrong, because he wasn't doing anything wrong. He was just having fun, just being a good teacher. Though he was doing something different and dangerous, and yet he kept playing. Fusayo was his favorite, and no one knew why. If anyone had asked Mr. Lyde if he had a favorite student, he would have denied it. Of course, he liked all his students equally, he would say, with a convincing smile. But there was no denying that Fusayo was special to him. She was quiet, a bit more reserved than the others. She was curious and eager to please anyone, which made her the perfect student in Mr. Lyde's eyes. Whenever she spoke, he gave her his full attention, praising her for her answers even when they weren't correct. Other teachers noticed how he treated Fusayo. They saw how he found small reasons to keep her after class for extra help, but they dismissed it, seeing it as him taking a special interest in a student who needed a little more attention. After all, she was a bit shy, and maybe he was just trying to help her come out of her shell. But Lyde knew it was more than that. He couldn't stop thinking about Fusayo. She was the first thing on his mind in the morning, and the last thing he thought about after school. One evening, after school had closed, Miss Amaka, who had been Mr. Lyde's colleague and friend for 5 years and had been noticing how he interacts with the female students in his class, carrying them on his laps most times during breaks, decided to speak to him about that. "Mr. Lyde, there is something I would like to talk to you about if you don't mind."
What is it, Mr. Maka?
He asked, eager to know. "It's about your interactions with the girls in your class," Mr. Maka said gently. "I've noticed you're very affectionate with them. While it may be harmless to you, it could be misinterpreted, especially with Fusayo. Mr. Laide looked puzzled.
I like to make the girls feel comfortable and confident. Fusayo is shy and not as bright as the others, which is why I pay more attention to her.
I understand that, Mr. Maka replied, but we have to consider boundaries and perceptions. It's crucial to maintain professionalism, especially in today's world. He was able to convince Mr. Maka that his attention was purely professional, but deep down, there were more, though he refused to fully acknowledge it. There were moments when he crossed lines by letting his hand rest on the girl's shoulders and his palm placed on their flat chest. For too long during tutoring sections, but no one noticed. No one ever said anything, at least not yet, and so he continued. He gave Fusayo gifts, but no one else received one. Fusayo didn't think much of it when Mr. Laide handed her a small gift one afternoon. It was just a fish pie, she thought. Thank you, Mr. Laide, she exclaimed, grateful for the thoughtful gesture. As she packed up her things to head home, Miss Tosin stood by the door, watching with a growing sense of discomfort. She had seen the interaction, the way Mr. Laide had leaned in close, his smile a little too wide, and his tone a little too intimate. Something about it felt off. But she told herself not to overreact, that she was saying things where there was nothing. Though a seed of doubt had been planted, and she wondered if she should speak up, or if doing so would make her seem paranoid. The next day, the teachers gathered during lunch break to eat and exchange their usual gossip. But the topic of conversation had shifted, and it revolved around Mr. Laide. I heard he gave one of his students a snack, Miss Tosin murmured, trying to sound casual. Fusayo Adele, I think. I saw it happen the other day. The others looked at her with raised eyebrows. A snack? That's strange, isn't it? Asked Miss Obi. That's nice of him, but why only her? Mr. Maka asked. Miss Tosin shrugged, feeling awkward now that she had brought it up. I don't know, it just seemed a bit odd. I've noticed he spends a lot of extra time with her. I'm probably just reading into things, but it made me uncomfortable. Mr. Laide was popular with everyone, students, staff, and parents alike. He had built a solid reputation over the years as someone who genuinely cared about his students, Mr. Maka said. He's always been a bit close with the kids, another teacher said cautiously. But I never thought anything of it. He's just good with them, you know. Maybe it's nothing, Miss Sobi added quickly, trying to lighten the mood. Maybe he's just trying to help Fusayo out. She's a sweet girl and he probably sees potential in her. Break was over and they all returned to their work. No one wanted to be the one to accuse Mr. Laide of something they weren't sure of. After all, they had no real proof. Just a growing sense that something wasn't quite right. Soon it was the annual parent-teacher conference, which happened to be a busy time for Mr. Laide. Parents lined up to hear glowing reports about their children, to thank him for his hard work, and to express how grateful they were to have him as their children's teacher. Fusayo's mother, Miss Adele, was no exception. She had heard only wonderful things about Mr. Laide from her daughter, who spoke of him constantly, praising his teaching, his kindness, and the way he always encouraged her to do her best. And she had been eager to meet him in person. My daughter has said a lot about you, Mr. Laide. Thank you for the work you do. She says you've been giving her extra attention, taking her on extra classes.
Yes, ma, she's one of my calmest students. I've been giving her extra attention to make sure she reaches her potential,
he said. Mrs. Adele's instinct screamed warning. Extra attention for she alone? She asked. Mr. Laide's expression faltered for a moment before recovering.
Well, yes. I thought it would help her feel more comfortable.
Mrs. Adele nodded, but her worry grew. I've noticed she's been spending more time with you after school. Is that necessary? Mr. Lyde laughed.
Oh, nothing to worry about. I always make myself available for students who need a little extra help.
Mrs. Adele forced a smile and thanked him, but as she left the classroom, she pondered on a lot of things. She couldn't help but feel that something wasn't right. It wasn't just the way he spoke about her daughter, but the way he smiled when he talked about their after-school sessions. I am not comfortable with the teacher, but I don't know what this is. I think I need to keep a closer eye on my daughter Fusayo, she said to herself. Fusayo usually loved the extra time spent with Mr. Laide after school, but was beginning to feel off lately. After school, her classmates packed their bags and hurried out of the classroom. But Mr. Laide caught her eye as she stood from her desk. Fusayo, are you leaving? He asked. She waited. Yes, sir. I was supposed to meet my mom at the gate,
Okay, it will only take a second.
he assured her.
Fusayo, I just want to tell you that I'm proud of you, and I want to make sure you stay ahead of the curve. You've got so much potential.
Thanks, Fusayo murmured.
Don't thank me yet. You just need to trust me, okay? I am here to help you. You know that, don't you?
Fusayo nodded and then left. Late that evening, Mrs. Adele's phone rang and it was Miss Tosin on the other end. Hello, Miss Adele. This is Miss Tosin from Bright Scholars. I wanted to speak with you about Fusayo. Is everything all right? Miss Tosin's voice was careful, deliberate. I've noticed some things recently that concern me about Mr. Laide. I know Fusayo has been spending a lot of time with him after school, and I think it's important we talk. Miss Adele felt her heart skip a bit. What kind of things? I've seen him giving her special attention in ways that don't seem appropriate. He's very attentive, and I'm not the only one who has noticed. I just think you should be aware of it in case something doesn't feel right. Are you saying you think something is happening? Mrs. Adele anxiously asked. I'm saying it's worth paying attention to. Miss Tosin replied. If anything feels off, trust your instincts. You're her mother. After hanging up, Fusayo's mother stood in silence. Something was wrong, and she knew it. That night, she could not sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking out loud. She thought about her visit to the school and her interaction with the teacher. She wanted to brush them off, but she remembered Miss Tosin's words, trust your instincts, you are her mother. She immediately admitted that something was wrong, even if she didn't have proof. And the more she thought about it, the more she realized she had noticed things before, like Fusayo's reluctance to talk about her after-school sessions, or the way her daughter's demeanor had subtly changed. Her heart pounded in her chest. She needed to talk to Fusayo. She wanted to know if she had missed something important that could have protected her daughter. She had to ask, even if she wasn't ready for the answer. The next morning, she woke Fusayo up at 4 o'clock a.m. I've been thinking a lot about your after-school session with Mr. Laide. How are they going? Fusayo looked up at her. They are fine, Mom. Why? Well, it seems like you're spending a lot of time with him, more than usual. Is everything okay? Yes, it's fine. He's just helping me with my homework. I want you to tell me if anything doesn't feel right, okay? If Mr. Laide ever does anything that makes you uncomfortable, you can tell me. You know that, right? Mom, it's fine. Mr. Laide is just helping me. You are making it sound weird. I am just worried about you, that's all. If you ever feel like something is wrong or if you don't want to stay after school with him, you can tell me. Promise me you will. I promise, Mom, but it's really not a big deal. Fusayo prepared and went to school that day. After school, she was the last one in the class, as she often was, waiting for her tutoring session.
Ready for our lesson?
Mr. Laide asked. Fusayo nodded. and he quickly moved his chair very close to her, then began by explaining the math problem on the board. But Fusayo found it hard to concentrate. All she could think about was all her mother had said. Soon Mr. Lyde placed hand on her knee, his finger pressing lightly. For a moment Fusayo froze. She didn't know what to do. The hand kept moving until it had gotten into her thighs, and soon she began to feel his fingers very close to her vagina. Was it an accident? Should she say something? But the hand didn't move away. Fusayo quickly stood up, and her chair scraped loudly against the floor. I have to go, she stammered, grabbing her bag and rushing toward the door.
Fusayo, wait!
He called. But she didn't stop, she couldn't. She pushed through the door and ran down the stairs without looking back. When she got home that afternoon, she avoided her mother and went straight to the room. She couldn't stop thinking about what had happened in the classroom. She replayed it in her mind as she tried to convince herself that it wasn't what it seemed, that maybe she had misunderstood the teacher. Her mother was worried about her behavior. She felt it was more than teenage moodiness. And when she asked her later about it, she said nothing to be worried about. The next day at school, Miss Obi, who happened to be a creative writing teacher, asked the students if they have a secret, something they could not speak out loud or something they do not want to tell anyone. Some said yes, while others said no. And so she asked they write and tell her their little secrets. Before 30 minutes, Fusayo had submitted a full page of her secrets. She had written down in the page what had happened between her and Mr. Lyde. Sometimes the people we least expect to help us are the ones who see the truth most clearly. I need to talk to you. Please meet me in my classroom after school. Miss Obi said to Fusayo, Don't worry, you are not in trouble. I just want to share a story with you. Miss Obi had always been kind, always looking out for the students. She must have read my little secret and maybe she could help. After school was over, Fusayo walked to Miss Obi's office. When she arrived, Miss Obi was sitting at her desk, grading papers. Miss Obi looked up and smiled gently when she saw Fusayo standing before her. Come in, she said, directing her to a chair across from her desk. Fusayo sat down. She didn't know what to expect, but the nervous system in her chest was overwhelming. Miss Obi began, I am not going to pressure you to tell me anything you're not ready to share, she said softly. Are the things you wrote about Mr. Lyde true? Yes, ma. Everything I wrote in that paper is true. Okay, my dear. I will handle it and make sure this doesn't repeat itself again. But you must do something for me. What, Miss Obi? Fusayo asked. You have to go home today after school. You do not have to stay back. All right, Miss Obi, she said. After school, while the children packed their bags to leave, Mr. Lyde said to her,
Fusayo, we need to catch up on some of the work you've missed. Stay back, okay?
Fusayo nodded, but left before anyone else did. Mothers know when something is wrong, even if no one says it. Mrs. Adele's mind has been on her daughter, and she had noticed that something had been off for days. Her daughter's silence was starting to weigh on her. She had always known when something was bothering her, even when her daughter tried to hide it. In school the following day, every conversation seemed to be about Fusayo, though she knew it couldn't be. Mr. Lyde continued to teach, as if nothing had happened. Maybe he does not know yet, she thought. Miss Obi had taken Fusayo's story to the management of the school, and they had called her for interrogation. Fusayo, please tell us everything, because this is not just about you, but about all the other kids Mr. Lyde might have hurt. It is about making sure he couldn't hurt anyone else. Fusayo spoke about the times he had touched her and about how he had tried to convince her it was a mistake. When she finished, the principal thanked her. You've been incredibly brave. Thank you, she said to her. The school called Mrs. Adele and told her everything. Mr. Lyde was under investigation. He hadn't been suspended yet, pending the investigation. But his movements were now more deliberate and more careful. One afternoon, as Fusayo was leaving the school, she saw him standing near his car, talking to another teacher. He knows, Fusayo thought. Her worry grew with the thought. He knew it was her. He had to. But there was nothing he could do now. The wheels were in motion, and they wouldn't stop until the truth came out fully. That evening, as she sat at home with her mother, she couldn't help but wonder what would happen next. The truth was out there, but the fight was far from over. There would be more questions, more doubts, and more pain before this was finished. Yes, but with it, justice would be served, her mother assured her. The school board's investigation progressed slowly, too slowly for Fusayo's liking. She had told her story, but the process of uncovering the truth was painstaking. Other students were interviewed, and some had come forward with similar experiences, and the rumor spread everywhere. He decided to suspend Mr. Lyde pending the outcome of the investigation. Some students were relieved, others confused, and a few still refused to believe it. One day after class, Miss Obi pulled Fusayo aside. I know it's hard waiting for something to happen, she said gently, but these things take time. You've already done the bravest thing by telling your story. Don't lose faith now. Mr. Lyde was arrested and charged to court, and as his trial loomed closer, Mrs. Adele became more protective of her daughter. The day of the trial finally arrived, and the prosecution began by laying out the case. Multiple accusations from students, evidence of inappropriate behavior, and testimonies that painted a clear picture of a man who had abused his position of power for years. The defense wasted no time in attacking Fusayo's testimony. Their lawyer was sharp, methodical, and relentless in his questioning. He tried to poke holes in her story, suggesting that she might have misinterpreted Mr. Lyde's actions or that she was seeking attention. It was a brutal line of questioning, designed to shake her confidence and discredit her account, but she stood firm. She didn't just fight for herself, she fought for every student that has been silenced. The wait for the verdict felt like an eternity. Finally, the jury reached a decision. Mr. Lyde was found guilty on multiple counts, and he would face the consequences of his actions. Fusayo's mother hugged her tightly. You did it. You were brave, and now justice has been served, she said. The battle had been long and painful, but in the end, the truth had prevailed. Fusayo and the other affected students began therapy to deal with the emotional aftermath of their ordeal. The school held a meeting acknowledging their failures in protecting its students and announcing new measures to prevent such abuse in future. Policies were rewritten and mandatory training sessions were scheduled for all staff members. Years passed and Fusayo had settled and her relationship with her mother grew stronger. Fusayo remained grateful and often thought about how lucky she was to have a parent who believed in her and stood by her side through everything. Not everyone had that. She was also grateful for all the staff members of Bright Scholars Academy. Hello, favorite one. Thanks for listening to my stories. Your support means the world to me, and I couldn't do this without you. Your likes, comments, and shares keep me motivated to create more stories. If you're new here, welcome to the channel. Don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on the post notification bell so you never miss out on any of my new stories. Thanks again, and see you in the next story.